least 2 different outlines. And if you can produce more than 2, I ideally would like to have 3 or 4 outlines so we can see what is it that you have in mind. And do not focus so much on the prompt at this point in time, but focus on the kind of story that you're looking forward to telling. So speaking of prompts and stories, I do want to mention this once again. There are 2 approaches here toward writing the essay. The first approach is to look through the prompts and highlight the keywords which you believe this prompt is asking you to discuss. If the prompt is about accomplishments or about failures or about realizations, then I need you to highlight these keywords and make sure that you understand what exactly is the prompt expecting from you. Then you can begin the outlining of your story without even deciding on a specific prompt just yet. Maybe some prompts really appeal to you, and you, by looking at it, you think, well, I really like number 4, I really like number 5, or I'm debating between 4 and 6, like that. But you will have to highlight the keywords of the prompt. This is the first strategy. And then looking at what each prompt is expecting from you to kind of narrow in and decide, okay, prompt number 5 really sounds like I have something going on there. I can really talk about my experiences. I have a story to tell, and then you begin the outline. The other approach is to not worry so much about the prompt, but maybe keep the prompts on your Google Doc, and at the bottom or at the next page, you can begin outlining. If you're not the kind that really likes to outline, although here I suggest you do, if you're not the kind that can sit down and go A, B, C, D, and so forth, just put down your thoughts, okay? And I will show you in just a bit. Last time I did show you an organized outline. This time I'll show you just a mumbo jumbo of words that actually became a story. So you can use both ways to approach your story. You can just try the outlining or just writing down words that come to mind, so you're not limiting yourself and you're allowing yourself to kind of flow and brainstorm without any hesitation. So you can put down whatever comes to mind, and later on, after you have a big sort of bulk of what you have collected in terms of a story, then you can look and say, well, this very much looks like a story I can use for prompt number 5. Or this very much looks like a story I might be able to use for prompt number 2. So this is the other approach. You're starting from the larger idea and then zeroing in, the more specific keywords of the prompt and trying to fit the large bulk of work into the topic. So either way, we're all different. And what works for one may not work for the other. So we want to be successful. That's the bottom line. There's certain criteria we will have from our writing, and as long as we meet those criteria at the end, it doesn't matter what our process is, whatever works for you. Now, I do have to mention a few things here. And last time I discussed prompts at length. And I discussed the topics that you might want to tell. Again, my suggestion is do not worry about a specific topic so much, but more about how am I going to tell this story. All right. So before we continue, I wanted to look into a story here. And this is an actual story of an actual person, an actual student of mine. And I wanted to show you how, because sometimes what happens is when students look into some final products and you guys read essays that are out there, you feel, I can never write like this. And it just gets very stressful. And that's not the intention. Everyone started out with some very unorganized ideas somewhere in some Google Doc. And the good thing about this is that no one will have to read it except, you and the person you work with and whoever is helping you. No one will really have to see this gibberish, this mumbo jumbo of words, these ideas of, your imperfections. So you do not have to worry about that. And anyone that's working with you, if I'm working with you, you're not really being judged. Okay, so you're encouraged to be yourself. So this is an actual working doc that the student is using to put down her ideas. And she started out just by writing notes. Okay, and it says here essay, story, and then learn the saxophone, camp, everything that kind of came to her mind. The confidence, and she was part of a band, and she had to put herself out there with a ton of awesome players when she joined the band, and she didn't have confidence at the very beginning that she will actually be able to walk side by side in that marching band and play the music. Okay, so these are just really discombobulated notes and ideas and fragments of different stories that she had to tell. All right, important. After all this mumbo jumbo and all this combination of stories, please write down for yourself, what is the twist? So again, for those of you who work with me, you probably know what I do. I will ask you a few things. The first one is, after I see this brainstorm of yours, I will ask you tell me the gist of it and let me hear what your story is all about. And then I'll ask you this, which you should ask yourselves too. Where's the twist? Do you really have a twist? Where did you start here in this journey, and what kind of tripped you up? What was it? Something in your mind? Were you jumping shadows and scared and insecure? Or did something happen where you did not have maybe in this case, for example, as she is part of the marching band, well, maybe there was no time, maybe she had to tackle APs, maybe she really was not a musician. Her story is not like that. However, I'm just giving you an examples here and coming up with stuff on the spot. So what is the twist? Where is the twist? Better yet, if you really want your story to be memorable, do not think so much about this as a twist, but think about this as, where is my story going to get really prickly and uncomfortable? Where is the monkey wrench that stops the movement and shifts and pivots everything to the completely opposite direction? So if there is something that is really prickly and uncomfortable in my story, then that is going to be my big problem that I have solved, or I am asked to solve in the process. That is going to make your story interesting. So think about it as a twist, but if you can think about it as a very uncomfortable, prickly twist, then that's even better. Okay. So for her, what is the twist? The twist is I hid at first, but I was forced to switch instruments. And that's where she was put into a situation where she had to learn something from scratch, to play that musical instrument. And then not only that she was able to play that, but she became the lead of the band, the marching band. And she was put as a lead, even though they were some very experienced players and people that she had learned from previously. Now she became their mentor, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that was really the twist for her, having to break the status quo, having to push herself and go out there and be who she never knew she can be. All right, now in the process, before this was even concluded, as you can see, she came up with, who are you? She had to tell her story. She's a Romanian and she plays music and she's part of a jazz band. And my question was, so who is your favorite songwriter? If you're a jazz band player, you probably have something to do with music. Okay, jazz music was her jam. And then we talked about the places where she's been. Has she ever heard of a live jazz band? And all this was actually related to the schools that she was trying to apply to, because we were in her mind trying to position her in that environment. If you're applying to Boston University and you're thinking about, oh, it's such a nice day outside here and I'm looking at the Milpitas Hills and it's sunny and bright, well, that's not really going to put you in that mood. Okay. So if you're going to be writing about jazz and if you're going to be applying to some of the East Coast schools, you have to mentally, physically transport yourself there. You have to imbibe the mood and the feeling and just the entire environment there so you can feel it better. And you don't have to necessarily pretend that you have been there if you haven't, but maybe you can write about you longing to really be in one of those, dark, real life jazz music places where, or, I'm just giving an example. So you have to try to visualize and you have to try to make the audience be there with you, but that will only happen if you have that feeling you yourself. So we talked a lot about Boston, Manhattan, and then again, every now and then in the midst of all this mumbo jumbo, we go back to, okay, so what's the conflict? Okay. What is the twist? What is the prickly situation? What is the uncomfortable part? Where are you breaking the status quo? And where's your personal discovery? Doing a role play of some sort. Okay. So we talked a lot about, her likes and dislikes, her interests, her music, the theaters that she attends or she's part of, everything that makes her her. Okay. So then we went down and it was a lot more brainstorming and we got to another idea, and it was somehow she was not able to get out of the idea about being a band player and music and all that. So her second draft was also about music. This time though, the twist that she gave to her second draft was about being in a band, but not so much focusing on the fact that she was shy and she had to learn a new musical instrument. But this time the essay was about how much male dominated the band was and where did she fit in that as a female, and how to her that was breaking out, breaking free and changing the status quo. And as the result, the changes that happened to her, it changed the way I think of problems. I would let someone else go first as long as they gave it my best shot. I will feel good, but if I don't do, okay. And then she stopped. So our brainstorming sessions went on and on, but as you can see, they were not perfect. You do not come up with a 650 perfect word essay in the first shot. You will need to go through this and you'll need to allow yourself to just come out of your shell and just write down, fragments and sentences and just words and whatever it is. And maybe even then, after you look at all these notes, you can create an outline. Perhaps it's not for everyone very easy to have all this in their head and just come up with a perfect outline. Think about it. What kind of a writer or what kind of process really suits you? If you think that you would like to have all these notes down and you don't worry about writing, spelling, sentences, you really worry about nothing. And then you go back and you highlight, okay, I see some words here that matter to me: heart, intentionality, speaking out, compassion, band. Okay, these are my words. And I'll just pull these words down and create an outline for what my essay might contain. Okay. Then we switched the entire narrative again, and we decided to speak about something that she does and she's very fond of. It was a sport, and she was also a diver. And then we began talking about diving. Now, why did I encourage her to talk about diving is because, again, remember, when you're writing these essays, you do want to stand out and you do want to kind of stay away from what might be common. So a jazz band or a band or a marching band, we're looking at, 20 people, 30 people, depending on how big the band, the school is, or what are you part of. So we are looking at a multitude of people there, and making yourself stand out, again, speaking about your personal experience, could be very valuable. But then looking at a sport such as diving, which is quite rare, gave her an edge where she is the only one experiencing, what she's going through, and she can speak from first person perspective, and there's no multitude involved in there. It was just her and her endeavor. So we decided to think about diving here. And then we started out with what was the one thing that she really loved about diving. And it turned out for her that diving reminded her of birds, and she really wanted to learn how to fly. And she wanted to fly. It was that moment from the time where she jumps to the time where she hits the water, those seconds of flying that felt her truly liberated. And then we were going to really take that moment of her experience of freedom and liberation and then combine it with a very negative experience. Again, we were looking for the prickly story, and we were going to speak about an injury that she experienced, but not a major injury afterwards. She experienced it while diving, and that prevented her from performing well in front of the judges for something that she had practiced for a very, very long time. So it was kind of like, we were combining the unfortunate incident with what happened to her, with the injury and her love for flying and her love for the sport, and giving it a very sort of negative, sad tinge. And then we made her overcome all that. So there were several things that were going on in here. And then she told her story about, how she truly believed that what she'd learned from this was that trying and failing is better than not trying at all. She was able to opt out. And okay, that's a good question. I'll answer that question here in just a bit. So for her, trying and failing was better than not trying at all. And she had an option to opt out from such a difficult routine, but she decided not to. She decided to give it a shot and perhaps embarrass herself or make it. It was really very difficult for her. And then she explained she joined the diving team. Again, the same process repeats. You see, here's the idea, and then you just put down the notes, put down the notes, put down the notes. And this is her diving essay, which was draft number 1. We finally looked at the stories about the band, looked at the stories about the diving, and she had several other stories there, which I'm not going to go through all of that. And then we felt that, okay, diving is really a good story. We can say that with lots of drama. We can vary sentence structure, and we can play up with grammar here also, and use all the techniques we can use to make this a very dramatic essay. Now, as you can see in this draft, we have green font, we have different font, we have green color, we have highlights, this is going to be use it and abuse it situation, where you take your text to people and you use it, you flip it, you highlight it, you underline it, you copy, you paste. Just do not delete. One thing you will not do on your Google Docs is you will not delete. Even if you think that what I wrote was just boo, 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 boo 100 times, or my life matters 1,000 times, I don't care. You're not deleting it, because every time you write something down, it is a little snippet of it's a momentous, it's a moment of your imagination, of your feeling, of your mood, of where you were at that specific moment. It is a snapshot of you and your creative process, and you can always utilize it. Trust me. Many times I will suggest, and when I work with students, I say this: if you have to delete, hold yourself, hold your breath, copy, cut, highlight, cut, and put it down at the end of the doc. You never know which part of little word you might need later on that you can actually end up using. Okay, so you don't want to really ever end up deleting your work, because that is you. Okay, so this is her first, again, working draft. And she starts with inward dives mess with my mind. Theoretically, they seem simple. Stand backwards on the board, jump and rotate forwards. Practically, it is different story. Standing up there in preparation is less of a mental speech of encouragement and more of a fight against every rational cell in my mind, telling me that jumping backwards and rotating forwards are not compatible and will have disastrous consequences. Every diver goes through it, even the best ones, because the fear of hitting the board with your head is involuntary, pervasive, and utterly paralyzing. Why we highlighted that? There's probably notes here. This is a copy, so you can't see my notes, but because this sentence right here was very important for us to use as her internal monologue. And this is something that if I were you right now, and if you're taking some notes or something, I'll write it down. Internal monologue. Speaking of techniques, your essay will be evaluated based on its technicality. So a little bit of I'm just going to, stop a little bit with reading and discussing this and speak here, insert a little bit, a few comments about techniques and how your essay is evaluated. They're not just reading your essay to see, oh, whoa, do we have a good story? Who's the person? What's the personality? That, but more. Your essay is being evaluated for your ability to write. And if you haven't learned how to write up to this point, then this might be really difficult situation for you, because you will be expected to write on higher than a 4th level writing, or higher than a 8th grade level writing also, or even a 10th grade level writing. You will have to demonstrate the ability of college level writing, of complicated twists and turns and expressions and grammar and spelling and mechanics and all the good stuff. So this is the time when you have to up your game a little bit. If you haven't had a chance to read literature that supports this kind of examples and writing, well, this is the time when perhaps you can pick up some literature. There are a ton of articles which I will recommend and suggest, and I'll have them in as part of this course. I will have mentioned a whole bunch of titles that you can go and read, so you can gain inspiration. You can see how some of these techniques are utilized. So one of them being monologue. I see a lot of students using dialogues in their writing of the personal statement. My recommendation is do not use dialogue. Avoid dialogue at any cost. Unless you're a good experienced writer, you have been writing for a while, or you have actually been coached on how to use dialogue. Dialogue is such a major pitfall, and it could just literally destroy your writing. Even if you try so hard to fuse it together, a dialogue can just give out the fact that you perhaps are not very experienced writer. Screenwriting requires dialogue, as you know, and there is an entire many hours of course and teaching on how to write dialogue. Why? Because it's difficult, and there are very few masters of writing dialogue out there. And I would say just simply avoid it. If you can stick to a monologue, now that is much better. Monologues are actually even stronger because they let us in your head and they allow us to hear what you think and how you feel at a particular moment. So utilize monologue instead. Anytime where you feel like, okay, oh, and my mom told me, okay, honey, let's go, you'll be late for school. And I said, no, not again. I'm feeling down and depressed today. And my mom said, oh, we're back again to the same situation. I'm just giving you an example, right? Useless. No one speaks like that. Okay, so just do not do it. If you can let me know what it is that you think, I'll much more appreciate it than hearing you speak to your mom. She said, he said, and so forth. So monologue, that's something that I'll really suggest that you use. Also, remember, in the personal statement, once you have to, copy it from your Google Docs and paste it onto the Common App, you will not have the luxury to use different fonts, italicizing. You will not have a chance to have bold letters. You will not be able to play between, Times New Roman and some other kind of style and font or spacing it. You're not given that luxury. They just don't want you to use that, or else everyone will be typing up in caps and hello in caps and, whatever. So they're not going to allow you that frivolity. So keep that in mind. Caps, bolding, italicized, you're not going to be able to use it. Everything that you have to say and any kind of impression you want to leave will have to be done through usage of the correct words. So do not count on any other sort of forms and shapes to express yourself. Oh, and just since I'm speaking about this, please stay away from poetry. Please do not come with, a fancy pentameter and try to emulate Shakespeare. It's just not going to go well for you. Now, but having said that, I will mention another technique at the very end that is quite, complicated. In case you should want to try that, you can utilize that. That will be entirely up to you. As long as you have good guidance, you can pull off anything, including script writing, which I have done only once with a student. But again, I caution you, it is not for everyone. All right, so monologue. Moving on, yet many divers still practice and compete inward dives, adding more and more rotation until everyone watching becomes dizzy themselves and start to wonder if the feats that these divers are performing are even humanly achievable. Okay, so this right here should have been really highlighted, and I'll tell you why, because it just does not belong in this essay. So again, this is another thing. When you're coming up with your brainstorming process and when you flow, you'll end up with a lot of information that later on you will have to cut. Why do you have to cut it? Because at this point, many divers still, how does that even relate to her? It does not. It has nothing to do with her. And also it is highly arbitrary statement. Many divers still practice and compete. Is that true? Do we know that for sure? It's arguable. We don't want to have any kind of logical fallacies in our writing. So we will eliminate snippets like these. Of course, you're not going to do that now. You will do that at the moment when you begin editing. So you have to edit these essays like your life depends on it. You absolutely have to edit and cut and make sure it is tight, concise, and the words are strung together. Nothing is said more or less than what you actually intend to say here. All right, so moving on, yet instead of finding myself flying gracefully in the air, I found myself with, and then here we stopped because what's happening with a sentence like this right smack in the middle of this essay? Well, anytime you're just telling the reader what happened, you have taken away the ability from them to imagine it. So this is my comment again. It is something that if I were taking notes, I'll write it down right now. Please do not insult your reader. Do not insult their intelligence. They can very well imagine if you allow them to imagine. Do not leave any areas where they have to fill in the blanks for you, or they will have to connect the dots, because then you're expecting them to do the work, and that's not what your job as a writer is. But at the same time, do not take away the moment of surprise and the aha moment from them, where they should be the ones imagining it. Anytime you use the adverb suddenly, you have just killed it. You have killed the excitement, you have killed the anticipation. So an adverb such as suddenly should completely be eliminated from any of your writing. If I tell you that I was in the ocean and I felt a slippery, I felt the slippery skin, and I turned around and my toes brushed against it one more time, and I felt the sharp pain of my body being torn apart. Okay, I have an encounter with some sort of animal in the water. If I start telling you that suddenly, and then I tell you what happened to me, just by telling you how sudden that is, I have deprived you from imagining it. I really want you to imagine that it was sudden, but I don't want to tell you that it was sudden. I want to tell you that the ache and the feeling, it was incomprehensible, and it was, it just ripped my body apart. It was like nothing I ever experienced before, and so forth, and so on and so forth. So here we stopped because this sentence would have just absolutely killed it for the reader, because she told him everything in one sentence. She told him that instead of flying, she was going to say, I found myself, failing. Now we will say this slightly later in a different way. So this is the first draft. Then she continued, she switched the color, and this time it's in red, because later when you go back, you do want to use the power of color to kind of aid you in remembering what were you thinking here and what were you thinking here. So do highlight, do color. Now she is what she is writing here is the second part of the essay, where she is describing the moment of diving and failing. Now, as you can see, and this will probably happen to you too when you write, you're not going to be able to, like I said, sit down and just whip it up 1,500 words and then cut it down to 650 and the world is a beautiful place. It's not going to happen like this. You will have to have snippets of, this is my beginning, and then you have to have the rest of the story. Maybe you will go back and remember something else and you'll write it down. So have a green and pink and red, and these are all patches. They could be like Post-its for you. And, each Post-it might be, might be a different part of your story, where later on you will take it and you will do what's called the montage. And this is a technique that is used in filming. The movies that you watch, you guys, they're not just all shot in one time. These are snippets of here, snippets of there, repetitions, the same moment replayed 10,000 times, and then vetted and edited until that part of it is probably taken and pasted somewhere else. So use the montage technique to put together your essay at the end. So make sure that you have those shots, and then each shot, each snippet, each story is, quilted together, montaged together to create your writing. And feel free to play around. Okay, no, this does not belong here. This moment is better here. And I will use another what's called foreshadow. Okay, so I'm just going to have my monologue right here. What I'm thinking, I'll have the foreshadow again, and that will switch my mood, and it will bring me a new idea and a new thought. Okay, so here we go. So here now she's explaining the diving. I rocked on the board twice and then lifted my arms for the final jump, determined to jump off higher than I had ever done before, ready to fly. Okay, description, attempt 1. I felt the rough edge of the diving board with the balls of my feet. I felt drops of water failing from my wet hair, making paths all the way down my legs and into the pool below me. I felt the cold breeze on my exposed back. The fine hair on my arms stood up in the response, and my heartbeat echoed through my entire body. Okay, this right here, you will see it's not going to be there later because we will edit this and take it out. A little note here again, just like I told you earlier, eliminate suddenly. Be very careful. I see a lot of students writing like this. Okay, and my heartbeat echoed through my entire body. You wouldn't know that. You cannot feel your heart echoing through your body, because nothing can echo through your body, let alone your heart. Your heart is felt differently in your body. I see students write, and I was so happy that day, and I walked away, and a smile broke on my lips, or I walked away smiling, or something smiling. You don't see yourself smile. Okay, you cannot see yourself from another perspective. We can hear you, and you can tell us that you wanted to smile, and you can think about the feeling and describe it, but you don't see yourself smiling. No one really sits like this and thinks, okay, now I'm smiling, let alone write it. It doesn't happen like that, because you're not, again, looking at yourself from another perspective. So please do not write like that. Even if in your mind's eye you're seeing yourself smile, you're still not going to write it, because again, it's about the reader's experience, not about your experience, but it's about us making the reader feel what we're feeling. We don't want to regurgitate it and then chew up that feeling and feed it to them. We want them to experience it alongside of us. not for us. Okay, so you have to kind of realize this here. So she felt the dampness. I took one final breath, swallowed to push my nerves deeper into my stomach. Okay, this is definitely an overkill over here. Anchored my eyes on the wall in front of me and lifted my arms for the final jump, ready to fly. As a reader, I'm reading this, and if this was the original, I would think, how long did this take? Are we aware of time? Because when we write, we do not just describe what we're thinking, what we're experiencing, who said what. You know, we are functioning in, we're functioning in a spatial reality that is not linear. First of all, it's not just, okay, this is now and this is tomorrow and this was yesterday. Okay, we're all over that quadrant. You know, we're experiencing reality, but at the same time, you also have to remember that we have to be able to portray time effectively. And if we want to say that the time slowed down, we have to use sentence structure to slow it down for the reader. Because if we're overwriting this, if we're over-explaining by using too many adjectives, what we're doing is we're making it cumbersome and heavy and too difficult for them to be able to seep through all these adjectives, and they feel overwhelmed. And we don't want to overwhelm our reader here. Okay, we want to make it brisk, sharp. If the time is moving fast, okay, if her heart is really beating fast, we're not going to be dragging on adjectives forever. All right. Okay, yet I found myself on the final jump with one foot on the board and one in the water, and my dive attempt was over before it ever began. I was ready to fly, but instead I was failing. So I was falling. So she's just telling the audience here, all this description is for nothing. Everything you just now described to me, you just told me you fail, and that's it. It's over now. And what did they just get from reading this essay? Nothing. I did not learn anything about you. I did not even feel better. I mean, the experience was just very unpleasant. Okay. What I learned, she put down here. Okay, I was definitely in tears, not only because I had failed a dive. Now here she had to explain exactly how she felt. So from this, I mean, what she learned. So from this experience, we could take down maybe 2 words. So we want about 500 words of what she has learned. So we can take 2 or 3 out of these 500 words and make it really, really tight. Okay. Then she went into the future and what she experienced. Here is her work on draft 1. So now that she has a draft 1, which is more like random brainstorming and ideas, she took all that and she rewrote that in a little more concise, more connected, more logical way. And then she ended up with this. I was sick of being grounded. I wanted to fly. I hated the way my feet hurt after I run. I despised the weight of gravity weighing me down. So I started to dive as my way to escape the physical burdens of land sports, and I got to look pretty well doing it. That being said, there's one particular aspect of diving that messed with my mind, inward dives. Okay. And then she continues reworking this by telling her story one chilly March afternoon, and so on and so forth. Okay. Then comes the next draft. I was sick of being grounded. I wanted to fly. Okay, this here needed work. This is her hook. It is too heavy. It is too, it goes on for too long. It's not hooking me. It's not doing anything for me. At first I'm interested. Okay, she doesn't want to be grounded. She wants to fly. Okay, check. I kind of like that. But then she's explaining to me about her feet hurting, and it just got a little too much. So the essay is reworked again. This time she has put a little bit of dialogue in there, which had to go. Like I said, we decided to brainstorm a whole new hook, and then we highlighted that in yellow to remember that this is our hook and this is still work in progress. And then we thought of fly or fail. Which one? My mind silenced. My body kept alert by the chill of the breeze and the icy punctures of the raindrops. against my bare back and neck. What are we doing here? What I suggested you do too. You look at your draft and you think, could I take my middle and make it my hook? Or could I take my end and start with that instead and flip it on its head? So you will have to think of this montage and try and play around flipping the parts of your essay to discover which one might be a better hook, which one might be a better body, and. It says here final draft, word count 622. That was not the final draft. She worked on this more, but I will just read to you what to her was going to be a final draft. I was bored of gravity. I was over the constant ache in my back from standing. Really poor beginning. I grew tired of the way my feet hurt after I ran. I was sick of being grounded. I wanted to fly. I, not going to work. Okay, so this student really thought she is done. And then she had to discover that this was not going to work. She had used a capital letters here, which again had to go because that's not going to work on the Common App. I found my voice. Absolutely. That is not how we create monologue. Again, no one finds their voice and says, oh, my voice just said absolutely. We have to write not how, we have to look and think and say, hey, how do I really function? How do I really think? Did I catch myself just say this to myself? Oh, let me write it down. Okay, it has to be seamless. So this was a work in progress, and the final essay looks very different than this. And I will have the final essay actually posted for you, so you can see it once you log in to see the other two videos plus the video from today. I'll also have some samples of these essays. I do want to warn you again, before you feel that someone else's writing is better than yours, the reason why I'm showing you the work here behind the final essay, so you can see how many drafts you should go through before something is final. The writing process is not just whip up something perfect. That could be very intimidating for you if you just start reading final essays. But if you see all the notes that went behind, the final work, and how many unsuccessful attempts and how many times each little situation needs to be retold again and again, that is the work that you have to do until you end up with something that is polished and amazing, right? And all of you will. Then there's some other essays here that she created, and some of them are on leadership, but I just wanted to show you all the notes that went in flow 1, flow 2, flow 3, work paragraph 1, paragraph 2. This is the essay that she wrote on the band, which was her initial story. So as I said, please have 2 or 3 outlines, 2 or 3 ideas that you can work and create a final product. And this will not be lost because you will have to prepare lots of essays for lots of colleges. Although your Common App is one, you will have to end up with several other supplemental essays. And if you're applying to scholarships, some of these can be actually used for scholarships as well. So your writing and all of your work will not be lost. It will all be utilized, and it will be very beneficial for you. So there is quite a bit of writing that this student here has put down before she could actually have the final essay that I will have put there. But before you read the final, I wanted you to see all the work that went behind it. So remember, use the power of monologue, avoid dialogue, cross out the words suddenly from your vocabulary and from your writing. Use the power of montage. I only have 2 colors here, but if I had to show you that, it would probably have taken maybe 6 or 7 or even 10 different colors. Why? Your essay may not have 10 different paragraphs and moments, but I would definitely use 10 different ways to make sure that I show where my monologue is. Maybe I can show where my foreshadow is. I'll show where my hook is. I'll show where my ending is. And then I'll play around with these colors, and I will think of each one of them being a snippet from my writing to create that montage of a final product. There's one more I would like to discuss, one more technique that is, it is advanced. Now, I have to say, for many of you, it all really depends on what kind of schools are you targeting and what kind of major are you applying to study. So if you're applying to Ivy League schools or Ivy League-like schools, or if you're applying for any of the creative majors from film to humanities, literature, history, psychology, I would highly recommend that, and again, Ivy League schools or Ivy League-like schools, your Common App will need to, in some shape or form, implement several of these techniques. So do not just count on, oh, I'm just going to have a foreshadow, or I'm just going to have a monologue. No, you have to have combination of all of those, because they will exemplify your abilities as a writer. But better yet, I will strive for highly or a slightly more complicated or more technical way of writing. One of them is called the braided essay. And what really is a braided essay? And I'm just going to show you here, again, using colors so you can understand and maybe even demonstrate for you a little bit. So the braided essay is when you have stories that are intertwined together to make one essay. The idea is to have one mainstream story and another one. Maybe you can have two if you're not very experienced with this, or if you if you don't want to try out something more complicated at this point in time, or you want to start out with something simpler. When you do the braided essay, use only two stories. So the idea is to have one main story and then another one. So if this is your main story, you can have your second story that is intertwined, and it just be careful so it does not run in parallel, which is another technique. So you can have the stories run in parallel. But here, when we talk about the braid, they have to be intertwined, and the main story continues to run in parallel while the other one is just kind of wrapped around and comes in the shape or form of memories or another experience that kind of relates to this one in some way. Okay. And I will kind of improvise in just a bit to show you what I'm talking about. So the main story has to stay. This is your first person perspective where you are going through the experience and you're thinking about it. However, this main experience or the main theme that you're discussing reminds you of something else that happened in your life, and you're connecting that story to this story, and you're making them intertwine. And why? It is because the theme you're able to find is the same. However, the stories will have to be very different. As you can see, the colors are strikingly different from one another. So there has to be that pop again. There has to be that, that major splash and major realization and that major pop out there, and the contrast. Contrast is another technique. You have to utilize contrast. Needless to say, if you have to have a climax and if you have to have a problem, you need to have a contrast in your writing. So let's just say that my theme is overcoming some sort of obstacle, and I am finding growth, and I'm finding my voice, and I'm finding myself to have emerged victorious from a very difficult situation. This is going to be my main story here, the difficult situation I'm going through. Okay. And it is, I'm having to overcome, I'm having to learn something. I'm appearing in front, I'm doing, let's say, speech and debate, and I've failed all this time after many days of practice, and going through studies and reviews and debates, and it's my moment again to shine, and I'm having a severe lack of confidence. Okay, this is my main story right now. Where will I get my confidence from? My story is running here. I'm right at the point where I'm in doubt, and I'm at the point of quitting at this point in time. I'm just about to definitely, I will tell my partner here, my speech and debate partner, that I'm sick, I can't show up, or something of that sort, or I'm coming up with something on the spot. This may or may not be the situation with you, right? Whatever your story may be, this is the main story. Now, right here is when I introduce my second story, and this is where the other story starts to run, and it comes in as maybe another voice that is inside of me that comes in a form of a memory. And now the cadence and the pacing of my story changes dramatically. I go a lot more slow, a lot more reflective. I reminisce. I'm soft in my speech, and I remember the 2 black shoes that I found in my grandma's attic one summer when I was visiting, and I was going through her dusty attic up there in the house, and I was looking through her old clothes, and in that chest where she keeps all of her clothes and shoes and jewelry that were given to her from her mother maybe. And I found these old black shoes, and I put them on. And when I tried these black shoes, I suddenly felt where my grandmother comes from. I felt the times when they were running from there was a depression, and they were running from state to state, and she had just lost her parents, and she didn't know where she was going, and she was still very young and insecure, and this was a major change in her life, and she was pushed away to migrate from one state to a completely different state, and then she was fearing for her life. I felt her story. I could live her story. I lived at that time, in that moment, and these are the 2 black shoes that carried my grandmother from one state to another, where she was looking for her new life, still hopeful that she can find happiness and she can find realization of her dreams and hopes. That's my second story. Now, this story is reflective. I'm coming back to my first story, where I'm in the midst of this crisis, where it's a go time and I'm fearful and I have severe lack of confidence. The confidence in these black shoes that I wear in that minute is where I transfer myself again, and I gain confidence and power to continue. I feel that I have the spirit of my grandmother. I have the power of my entire female family that comes from my grandmother to my grandmother to my mother, and I get this energy and I get this excitement that I continue that powerful fighting spirit of my family. And this is my moment to wear these 2 black shoes and to go out there and show them what I'm made of. And this story now here is connected to my initial first story. They 2 blend momentarily, and I continue with a different voice now, back to reality, describing what is happening to me. So this is called the braid. This doesn't look much like a braid here. Okay, but these are 2 stories that are running and they're intertwining because there is that converging point in the middle. Do not make them parallel. That's a different situation. You do not have the luxury to have parallel stories in a personal narrative because you only have 650 words. Okay, so this is a rather complicated technique because it does require more writing. And it's going to be interesting to pull it off in 650 words, but yes, you can do it. And it does show sophistication of and knowledge of writing abilities. Now, if you really want to challenge yourself a little more, then you can introduce the 3 colors here. So you can bring in another color or another story into this, and then you can go and you can intertwine them. And you have to play here with, again, sentence structure, cadence. You have to, one tone of voice will have to be more soft and more descriptive, and the other one will have to be more dynamic and choppy for you to really take the reader into the different braids, but make sure that the story that is in the middle, as you can see here, the yellow, that is constant. So these other pop-in colors will have to converge thematically to the main story that is running through. Okay, and I will have, again, once you log in, if you're part of this course or if you're my student, you'll have the code to enter and you will find actual examples of braided essays. So you can see, you can get the idea and you can emulate those examples to the best of your abilities on creating yours. I highly recommend, again, if you're targeting very competitive schools, for you to consider that your writing will have to be not just your regular 10, 11 grade language arts paper now, but it will have to be at a much higher level, technically constructed. It will have to have all the elements that exhibit your style as a writer, your maturity, and it really has to make your personality, it has to exemplify your personality and your experience. And all of you will be able to do that. You just need to perhaps sit down, and the first thing that you'll need to do is, yes, do write down.
It's 2:00.
Do write down everything that you have in mind without any inhibitions and practice the montage technique. Now, I do want to mention that in addition to the braid essay, there's two other styles that I can group kind of largely, because it can get too technical at the end, and there's some paralysis in the analysis, and we don't want you getting there. So for simplicity's sake, I would say one kind of essay here could be the essay with very dynamic tone of voice, where you have the regular hero's journey, as we discussed last time, changing the status quo and bringing out a new environment, creating a new environment where it's your new beginning, your new realizations, new you. That's one. And the second essay could be the very slow and very descriptive kind of essay, especially if you're writing about a talent or ability that you have. This is an essay where you will go slow and very, very descriptive, where you're actually showing your abilities to write in a very stylistic, very descriptive way, where there's no status quo and there's no hero. The hero, you and your voice, are describing a specific talent where time disappears and you're just reflecting about your surroundings, and you're giving it more of a philosophical tinge and not so much of a dynamic and experience-based tinge. Okay, so think about it. There are three kinds of essays that you discovered that you can write today. And I do want to address some questions now. If you have, I already have a question here that says, is the twist and the setback the same thing? Yes and no. Okay. Now, the setback is something that you will absolutely have to address, and that will be your problem. Now, the twist can come from you starting to solve the problem. Things can go in a completely opposite way. So you have one problem that you're solving, you start solving the problem, and now comes the twist, where everything you thought is going to happen actually goes wrong. And that is the twist. And that is where the prickliness has to, it has to appear. For example, I just had a story we were writing yesterday where, the student started out by saying that he had to take a very difficult math course, and he had a best friend, they decided to study together and help each other. And at the same time, he was gaining inspiration from a history teacher who's been very helpful to him. And, now in the process of solving the problem with math and just trying to tackle all that, in addition to everything else that he was doing, he discovered that, he was the only one who got into that. They had to apply for that very difficult math course, and he was the one who got in and not his friend. And they had studied together. The friend was the one who knew the bigger chunk of the work, helping our student. Well, it turned out that the friend didn't get in and our student got in. And now that was the twist here, because now the friendship kind of suffered in the process, and he started feeling like a failure. So now he had to tackle his own feelings and insecurities. That's the prickliness. That's the twist. Okay, so I hope this kind of answered your question, but look, think about it this way. For every good book that you've read, or every good story that you've read out there, or movie that you have seen, if you can think of one thing going on the way you imagine, just do completely the opposite, and then you have a story. Someone might be asking me here now, well, wouldn't that be fiction, and that's not our story, and then aren't we lying? Okay, so keep this in mind, to just not have too many sleepless nights and sweating the lack of truthfulness in your writing. Every story is a bit of a fiction. So my friends, if you really think that, oh, I'm not being authentic because that's not exactly how this happened, well, yes, it did not happen exactly like that. Can you tell exactly how it happened? Probably not. When did this even happen? 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 2 months ago? Do you remember the story to have happened in more than one way? Probably. Okay, so what's the truth? So how can you tell this story in the most authentic way, but also in the most intriguing and interesting way? Are you embellishing somewhere there? Is there some sort of authorship? Do you have that ability to bring a little bit of fiction into, a little bit of an exaggeration to your feelings? You might be. But this is your way of telling the story, and that's why this is your story. So don't sweat it too much. Don't sweat the small things. Instead, focus on how enticing and grabbing your story is, and how memorable your story is instead. So, and it starts with drafting, and revising. If there's no more questions, and I would really like to see more questions at this point, if you do not have any more questions for me to ask me, for those of you who have attended today, I would really want to thank you. And for those of you who, if you feel that there's more that you would like to hear, if you have some specific ideas, or if you feel that there was something that you were hoping that I would address but I did not, please do get back to me and ask questions, and I will encourage you to enter and use your codes and go and perhaps read what I have put there in terms of materials. They should be, it's something that is going to be added on and added on and added on. So as you progress and as you write, you can always go back there and take a look. And we can use these as a reference to go back and say, oh, can you go and take a look at essay number 1, because your story is very similar, and you might actually want to read that again and learn how that was done. It will be of help to you. All right, so if there's no more questions, I'd like to say I wish you a great weekend, and I'm looking forward to meeting with all. Please have some drafts and outlines ready so we can actually make progress when we meet together in person. And I have something specific to guide you with and to show you on how it's done. All right, have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.